facility licenses recommended for approval. Everybody have a chance to look over all the new licenses, new building, leasing space, change of ownership, existing facility, new funeral home license, and occupancy permit and final inspection.
Mr. Chairman, is this a combination of last month's and this month's combined?
This is.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
4.02, individuals recommended for licensure. We have some applying for dual licenses and some for funeral director licenses. Do we have a motion to approve individuals for licensure?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And we have 4.03, Sierra Hill, request to serve apprenticeship from 2 locations. Her father just recently passed away. And her master is committed to supervising both locations.
I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
So is our new funeral director actually in charge at the location? And then the application?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Roll call?
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And we have a 4.04, Adam Holozak,
Holichek.
request to serve apprenticeship from 2 locations. One would be Holichek Funeral Home in Parma, Ohio, and Hopco Funeral Home in Parma, Ohio. And his father is his master, Peter.
I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
And Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
4.05 is a no motion item. Individuals have been given a registration number for their licenses. And we have individuals certified as an apprentice. Anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll move on to continuing education, 5.01, continuing education programs. Recommendation to be approved. Everybody had enough time to look at these Con Ed classes? Any questions concerning any of the classes being offered?
I'm assuming, Mr. Chairman, this went through our internal check already?
Yes,
Everything was in order?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Tannen?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
And Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Motion passes.
we're moving on to compliance 6.01, report and recommendation for Bauer Turner Funeral Home, case number 150006752. So we need a motion, what, for findings of facts?
Need a motion for all three.
Okay, all three finding of facts. Conclusion of law.
Typically, we have clients do those as separate motions, just have a vote on each thing, on the findings of fact, on the conclusions of law, and then adopting the recommendation. You can adopt, modify, or reject.
Mr. Chairman, I will, I'm not sure, you're saying take each one individually?
Yes, so it would be for the first, it'll be quite a few motions here, but for the first Bauer Turner Funeral Home, one motion to adopt findings of fact, and then one motion to adopt conclusions of law, and then again for the recommendation.
So do we have a motion for finding of facts?
So move.
Second, anybody second it?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Tanuff?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
And Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Motion approves.
So now we need a motion for conclusions of law.
So move.
Any second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tanuff?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Now we need a motion for report and recommendation.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion?
I want to say something. Looking at this $500 forfeiture, this process makes no sense to me at all. It cost us more than $500 to do this hearing. And they still, the folks weren't accountable for what they did. They were blatantly late in filing these reports. And I'm going with this because seeing the backlog of the AG has with this board, which I'll talk about later, we need to get some of these cleared. I'm going to vote in favor of this. This cost us more money, this hearing, state time, taxpayer dollars, than this forfeiture. That's all I have.
And compliance 6.02.
I need to take that.
Oh, roll call, sorry. Roll call.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Tanuff?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
And Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
6.02, report and recommendation, Orange Funeral Home, 150006781. And we need a motion for findings of fact.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tanuff?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
And for conclusions of law, do we have a motion for conclusions of law?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Tanuff?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I thought you said Mr. Tanuff. You said Mr. Champlin.
I started with Mr. Taniff and then went to Mr. Chandler.
I think Mr. Chandler made the motion.
Okay.
So I didn't know if you wanted, when you were just calling the vote,
I just alternate the roll call and vote.
never mind.
Okay. Mr. Chandler?
I'm still yes.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
And Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
And I need a motion for report and recommendation.
So moved.
Do we have a second? I second it. Any discussion?
There's no sense hearing me talk, so it's the same issue.
And we'll do a roll call before I forget.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Taniff?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
And we're still in compliance, 6.03, report and recommendation, Washington Funeral Home, 15006788. And I'm going to need a motion for findings of fact.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Taniff?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
And Mr. Boyer?
Yes. We need a motion for conclusions of law.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that Mr. Wasco? Oh, Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
And Mr. Taniff?
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Taniff?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
And we need a motion for report and recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Mr. Taniff?
Yes.
Mr. Wasco?
Yes.
All three motions pass.
And 6.04, recommendation to charge case 16000027.
Would you like me to explain the details of the case?
Yes.
Okay. I'll review all the details of this case. In February 20th, 2015, I received an email from the Department of Health asking for assistance where 2 death certificates were filed for the same person. Curtis C. is how we'll refer to him. Included in the email were both death certificates, obit notice, and a Walnut Hills Cemetery information. Both DCs had the same Social Security number and date of birth. However, 2 different funeral homes were involved. One DC was handled by Funeral Home A, as it will refer to them as, with burial by means of disposition, and filed March 30th, 2015. The other death certificate was handled by this respondent with cremation for means of disposition and filed June 4th, 2015. July 30th, 2015, at 10:05 a.m., Inspector Seahouse arrived at Funeral Home A. There he met with the funeral director who provided him the file on Curtis C. He reviewed the statement of funeral goods and services and also a copy of the check to pay for funeral services. Both documents were signed by the daughter of the deceased, Curtis C. 11:40 a.m., Inspector Seahouse also arrived at the respondent. There he met with funeral director who provided him cremation container containing the cremains claimed to be Curtis C. He requested a copy of the label stating that these are the cremains of Curtis C. The funeral director further stated that the crematory called in the later part of May inquiring about the status of Curtis C. since he had been there since March 17th. The funeral director made a copy of the cremation authorization form. It was filled out on June 4th, 2015, and signed by the daughter of the deceased. He asked if that was the signature of the daughter, and the funeral director said no. He stated the form was filled out over the telephone, and the signature was made by a funeral director staff member that was out of the office that day. At 12:30 p.m., the inspector arrived at the hospice facility where Curtis C. was reported to have passed away. He approached the nurse's station and requested a copy of the release sheet for Curtis C. Finally, after an extended period, the third person says that she is in contact with corporate office and is awaiting to hear back on what to do about the release for the requested information. She stated that she would get back with him later in the same day. 2:10 p.m., the inspector arrived at the residence of the daughter of Curtis C. She answers the door and he asked her about her father's funeral service. She stated that her father's service was handled by Funeral Home A, who had done services for her family previously. She stated that he was buried on March 28th. She further stated that she never had any correspondence or with any other funeral home about her father or his death. July 31st, 2015 at 10:15 a.m., the inspector arrived at the cemetery. Inspector reviewed the cremation logbook, and it shows that on March 17th, 2015, an individual titled as Curtis C. was dropped off at the facility. Inspector obtained a copy of the log sheet, also requested a copy of the release of cremated remains form for the individual titled Curtis C. The crematory operator also stated who was on the removal and that he might know about the removal. The crematory operator further stated that Curtis C. was a small gentleman and that he either was a single or double leg amputee. Curtis C. was reported to have both legs at the time of death. At 11:10 a.m., inspector contacted the gentleman who was on the removal. He stated that the removal was from the same hospice around noonish. He further stated that he was a smaller African American with no legs below the knee and that he had a long gray beard. He stated who signed paperwork at hospice. The description of the cremated Curtis C. did not match that of the actual Curtis C. who was buried. 12 p.m., inspector arrived at the respondent funeral home again. He asked the same funeral director. He further states that a memorial service was held at a church on a Friday and provides the name of the minister. He further stated that the minister had contact with the funeral home before the individual titled as Curtis' death, and that a staff member had talked to the family member a couple of times. He stated the staff member talked to the family member via phone and received permission to cremate verbally, and that the staff member had signed the cremation authorization form to do so. The staff member was out of the office running death certificates, but she would be back shortly and he would get together with her and discuss the situation. At 12:50, the inspector arrived at the hospice, was met with a member of their staff who said they did a little investigation. She stated that on March 17th there were 2 deaths, and both had the same first name of Curtis, and both died approximately 1 hour apart. She further stated that the Curtis the respondent picked up was the indigent burial, and the family had listed the name of the respondent on the paperwork. Hospice told the family about the indigent burial. After Curtis died, hospice called the family several times with no response to have family come back for final view, since indigent burial didn't allow viewing after the remains were removed. Finally, after several hours with no response, hospice called this respondent funeral home to make a removal. At 1:45, inspector arrived back to the respondent. There he met with the staff member who had been reported to have signed the document. The staff member indicated the name of a male family member whom she had contacted about Curtis, and he was a first cousin. They did talk about cremation. Since respondent had Curtis's remains in their possession, indigent burial couldn't take place, since that is how the city program works. He said that he would come up with the money to pay for cremation. The respondent called the hospital in the presence of the inspector and was informed that the Curtis they had picked up on March 17th was Curtis W. Again, the inspector asked if cremation authorization form was filled out over the phone, and the funeral director staff member said yes, and acknowledged signing it with the name of what she believed to be the daughter of the deceased. On August 14th, 2015, the inspector obtained a written statement from the daughter of Curtis C. She states she nor her family had ever had any contact with any funeral home except for Funeral Home A, who buried her father. With all that, we've made a recommendation to the board to charge the two funeral directors and the funeral home with the following violation. 4717.14A, the Board of Embalmers and Funeral Directors may refuse to grant or renew or may suspend or revoke any license issued under this chapter, or may require the holder of a license to take corrective action courses for any of the following, specifically for the applicant or licensee has committed immoral or unprofessional conduct. And also associated to Administrative Code 4717-A-01, unprofessional conduct. E is a violation of state or federal law involving dishonesty, falsification, misrepresentation, deceit, or deception. Specifically, the funeral director staff member falsified the cremation authorization form by signing the name of an individual she had never contacted. The funeral director, AIC, or was actually in charge, was aware of the deception and took no action to correct the situation. The funeral home proceeded with cremation without proper authorization. And with that, our recommendation was to propose a suspension of the two funeral directors and the funeral home's license via an adjudicatory hearing.
Mr. Chairman, is it necessary to have this entire process read into the minutes like this? I mean, because these are already public records, correct?
Correct.
And why does this have to be reread like this?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, do we have to have all of this reread?
If the board makes a motion regarding this charge, the board members would have to have personal knowledge of the facts therein. If the board members recognize that they've read this and concur with it, I don't see a reason to, but it's certainly not prohibited. So it would be up to the board how much they want to discuss and how much wants to be read into the record.
I don't know, and I'm, again, Chairman of the Ohio State Board of Cosmetology, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know that we have our executive director read through the entire cases where we have charges like this.
Well, today we kind of have a bigger audience today, so it's kind of good that everybody here can see what we're discussing, what we're talking about, and that way we show transparency to the other people here. I know most of us have seen this, but the rest of these people have not seen it.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's behind me, so
Can I make one clarification?
go ahead.
The content that you're reading is an administrative content only, so the public is actually not able to view any of these details before you deliberate. So in the past, you've had me go through the details so that the public understands what you're deliberating on.
And the public wouldn't be entitled to have access to this?
Not prior to you actually deliberating, no. Because if you so chose to close the case, the final verdict would be closing, so we keep the content up front and administrative content first.
As to what parts of content are public record or not, I'm not going to give any opinion right now. If you want me to look into that, I can. I'm not comfortable answering any more questions about that right now.
Okay.
As to what contained on board docs and what is not, and what's public record and what is not.
But as of now, this is a public
There's
record.
the public, sunshine laws.
Without,
Maybe at the beauty board, you should probably do that.
I'll take it under consideration,
All right.
and I'll discuss it with our AG.
Okay, very good.
Okay, we have a recommendation to charge the case. Any motion? To propose suspension of the two funeral directors and funeral home license via an adjudicatory hearing?
So moved.
Sorry. We have a second? Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Wesco?
Yes.
Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Mr. Tanner?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
And Mr. Boyer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And 6.05, we have a recommendation to close these cases. That's the closed case 1500063, 1500072, 1600025, 1600026, 1600028, 1600030. And then we have 1600031, 1600032, 1600033. And then we can add on 1600034, 1600040. That's all the cases. We have a recommendation to close these cases. Do we have a motion to close? I'll make a motion to close. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Boyer?
Yes?
Mr. Wesco?
Yes.
Mr. Marchbanks?
Yes.
Mr. Tanner?
Yes.
And Mr. Chandler?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And we have 6.06 pending cases.
Just would make one comment that all of the items that talk about misappropriation of pre-need with funeral home suspended are the same licensee. This is a funeral director that is already summarily suspended and is facing criminal prosecution in their hometown. And these are additional pieces of information that we are working with law enforcement on.
And then moving on to 6.07, request for representation to the AAG's office.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would like to just go on record to state that since July, when this board received a memo saying that we should look at how we settle cases, and we now have a backlog of 21 cases that needs to be settled that haven't been addressed yet. And one of the reasons that we were permitted by resolution to ask our executive director to settle cases is because of this type of workflow that was going to the AG's office. So as a result, the wheel has now stopped. And so I think we should be very concerned about what's going on. So right now, counting this, there are 21 backlog cases since July.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
with the segue that Mr. Wasco has provided, are we talking about the unauthorized practice of law by the executive director?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sir.
No.
Well,
We're talking about her doing her job that's actually mirrored to a lot of executive directors in the state. And we received a memo from the AG's office at one point telling us that,
Mr. Roscoe, you
Yes.
have not voted to waive attorney-client privilege. I'm just going to remind you that.
I don't understand what you mean.
The information you could be disclosing has not been voted on by the board to be waived.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to waive it.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
Advice from the AG.
The motion is on this particular memo that we received?
You made the motion.
Okay. The motion is on this particular memo that we received, based on a suggestion of what action the board can take. That's the one that I'm
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. Wait, roll call.
And what's the motion that we have?
Motion to waive attorney-client privilege on the memo from the AG regarding the unauthorized practice of law.
No,
That's what your motion was, and I seconded it.
no, that's not what I,
Well, see, this is the problem now, we can't play back what was said. This is the
that's not what
problem.
I said a suggestion on how us to handle these settlements. It was just a suggestion by
You
the
made a
AG's office.
motion to waive the privilege on that letter, and I seconded it.
Not that, I don't know what letter you were talking about. It wasn't the same one I was talking about. So I withdraw my motion.
I already seconded it.
There needs to be a vote if it's been seconded.
What's the exact motion, Kristen?
Vanessa read it back correctly from what I
I
understand.
had motion to waive attorney-client privilege on the memo from the AG regarding the unauthorized practice of law. I had a motion by Mr. Roscoe and seconded by Mr. Tanner.
Roll call.
So may I ask, what,
Yeah,
before the roll
discussion.
call, so if you want to withdraw your motion, Mr. Wasco.
I'm not going to withdraw it. We'll just
Pardon?
vote. We're just going to vote.
Okay, I just want to know what we're hiding if,
I'm not hiding anything.
okay, well, then let's vote on it.
Roll call.
Mr. Wasco?
No.
Mr. Tanner?
Yes.
Mr. Moyer?
No pass?
Sure.
Pass?
Pass.
Mr.
Excuse
Chandler?
me. Can someone pass on a vote, and don't they have to have grounds to pass on a vote? Passing on a vote, what's the basis?
It's a rolling vote.
What's a pass? I've never heard of passing on a
Are
vote.
you abstaining from voting?
No, I'm not saying I'm passing.
If you want me to, wait a second, I can look that up if you want me
Okay,
to.
let's
I'm
go ahead and
not
look it up.
sure.
You're the chairman and you're passing on a vote. This is your responsibility.
I can't listen to what everybody else has to say.
I've never heard of passing on a vote. If you have a conflict, I've heard of abstaining, but passing on a vote?